For 4,000 years, humanity had been silent. Not weak, not forgotten, just silent. The galaxy knew humans as relics, an ancient species that once burned brighter than collapsing stars, then simply stopped. No wars, no expansion, no retaliation, just quiet observation from the edge of mapped space. The Galactic Empire saw that silence as weakness. That was their first mistake, the taking. It started on a small colony world, Eden 47. A peaceful place, no military presence, no defenses, just families, researchers, and children. The Empire's fleet arrived without warning. Sleek black warships cut through orbit like blades. No negotiations, no announcements, just abduction. Thousands of human children taken. Why? Because humans were rare, unique, emotionally complex, perfect for experimentation or worse. The Empire called it resource acquisition. Humanity called it something else. The silence breaks. For 4,000 years, humanity had followed one law. We do not interfere. That law shattered the moment the first distress signal reached Earth. In a chamber buried beneath oceans and continents, something ancient awakened. Not a weapon, a protocol. The Aegis Directive. Last activated when humanity nearly destroyed itself and everything around it. A single message was broadcast across every human world. Our children have been taken. There were no speeches, no debates, only one response. Prepare for war. The fleet that should not exist. The Galactic Empire had the largest navy in known space. 12,000 warships, unmatched, untouchable. Until the stars themselves began to move. At first, their sensors malfunctioned. Then they realized those weren't stars, they were ships. Ancient human warships, hidden for millennia, powered by technologies the galaxy had never seen. Not thousands, not tens of thousands, 700,000. Each one larger than an Empire dreadnought. Each one silent. Watching, waiting. First contact again. The Empire tried diplomacy. Too late. A single human vessel entered their capital system. No weapons fired, no shields raised, just a message. Return them. The Emperor laughed and ordered the ship destroyed. They fired everything. Nothing happened. The human ship didn't even register the attack. Then it responded. One pulse. Not an explosion, not a beam, a correction. Half the Imperial fleet simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, erased. What humans became. The galaxy began to understand something terrifying. Humans hadn't been peaceful. They had been restrained. For 4,000 years, they studied reality itself, space, time, energy, consciousness. They learned how to bend it, rewrite it, unmake it. War was something they had evolved beyond, but now they were remembering. The rescue. Deep within an Imperial research facility, the children were kept, scared, alone, but not broken. Because humans don't break easily, and they weren't alone for long. The walls didn't explode, the guards didn't fight. Reality opened. Human soldiers stepped through space itself, not armored, not afraid, just focused. One by one, they took the children home. No casualties, no resistance, because by then, the Empire had already lost. The end of an empire. Humanity didn't conquer the galaxy. They didn't enslave. They even didn't occupy. They simply removed the empire. Leaders vanished, fleets dissolved, systems freed, as if the empire had never existed. A warning remained, broadcast across every star. We chose peace. You chose otherwise. Do not make us choose again. Epilogue. The galaxy changed that day, not because of destruction, but because of realization. The most dangerous species in existence is the one that chooses not to fight, until it has to. The silence after war. The war lasted 3 days. That was all it took for humanity to erase an empire that had ruled for over 10,000 years. And then, silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was heavier, watching, waiting. Across the galaxy, civilizations began to panic, not because humanity attacked them, but because humanity didn't. No expansion, no demands, no claim over the thousands of liberated systems, just withdrawal, like a storm that destroys everything in its path and then calmly disappears over the horizon. The observers speak. In the deepest regions of space, beyond mapped stars, beyond even ancient trade routes, something stirred. They had many names. To some, the observers. To others, the first minds. To a few forgotten species, the ones before light. They were older than empires, older than stars, and for the first time in millions of years, they were paying attention. A signal, older than language, spread between them. These silent ones have moved. They broke their restraint. They remember. For eons, the observers had watched the rise and fall of civilizations. Most followed predictable paths: growth, conflict, collapse. But humanity had done something different. They had reached the peak of power and then stepped back. That alone made them unusual. But now they had acted again, and that made them dangerous. A message from the dark. On Earth, the skies changed, not visibly, not physically, but every sensor, every system, every human mind linked to the planetary network felt it. A presence, vast, impossible. Then a message appeared, not transmitted, imprinted. You were not meant to act again. Humanity responded instantly, not with fear, not with confusion, but with recognition, because deep within the Aegis directive there had always been a second layer, a contingency, not for war against empires, but for something else, something older. The truth buried in time. 4,000 years ago, humanity didn't just choose peace, they were warned. Long before the Galactic Empire existed, humanity had encountered something in the void, something that didn't conquer, didn't destroy, just ended things. Civilizations, stars, entire regions of space, gone without explanation. Humanity fought it once and lost, badly. So they changed, they evolved, they hid, and they waited, because they knew one day it would notice them again. The line has been crossed. The rescue of the children, the destruction of the empire, the massive release of energy, of altered reality itself, it was enough. Humanity had broken the one rule that kept them hidden. They had become visible. The message came again, stronger this time. You will be corrected. For the first time since the war began, humanity hesitated, not out of fear, but out of calculation, because this wasn't an empire they could erase. This wasn't an enemy they fully understood. Preparing for the unthinkable. Across human space, something even older than the hidden fleets began to awaken. Structures buried in stars, machines woven into the fabric of space-time, weapons that never been used because they weren't meant for war. They were meant for survival.
The Aegis directive expanded. A new command was issued. Phase 2, Ascension Protocol. Humanity would not just fight, they would evolve again, faster than they had ever dared, stronger than they had ever dared be. The first sign. At the edge of the galaxy, a star went out. No explosion, no collapse, just gone. Then another, and another, like lights being switched off in the dark. The observers spoke once more. It has begun. Epilogue. The real war. The galaxy had feared humanity. They thought they had witnessed their true power. They were wrong. That was just a glimpse, because the coming war was not for territory, not for revenge, not even for survival. It was for the right to exist at all. And this time, humanity would not hold back.
When stars start dying. At first, the galaxy hoped it was a coincidence. Stars fail, systems collapse. It happens. But not like this. Not in patterns. Not in silence. Entire constellations began to vanish. Cleanly, precisely, like someone was erasing pieces from a map. No radiation, no debris, no trace they had ever existed. The younger civilizations panicked. The older ones remembered. And they were terrified. Humanity steps forward. For the first time in 4,000 years, humanity did not hide. They moved openly. Massive fleets emerged across the galaxy, not as invaders, but as a shield. Human ships positioned themselves between the spreading darkness and every inhabited system they could reach. No negotiations, no alliances required. Just one message broadcast everywhere. Stay behind us. Some obeyed. Some didn't. Those who didn't disappeared first. The shape of the enemy. At the edge of the expanding void, humanity finally saw it. Not a fleet, not a being, not something that could be understood in normal terms. It was absence. A moving region of unreality where physics simply stopped working, where time had no meaning, where existence itself unraveled. Human sensors struggled to define it, so they gave it a name, the Null. First contact with the Null. Humanity fired first, not out of aggression, but necessity. Reality-anchored weapons capable of stabilizing space-time were deployed into the advancing void. For a moment, it worked. The darkness slowed. The edge of the Null flickered like a shadow resisting light. Then it responded. Entire human fleets, thousands of ships, didn't explode, didn't break apart. They simply never were. As if history itself had been rewritten. As if those ships had never existed at all. For the first time, humanity took losses. Real ones. The children's gift. Back on Earth, the rescued children began to change. Doctors couldn't explain it, scientists couldn't replicate it, but the children, they could see the Null, not with eyes, but with something deeper. They described it in ways no machine could. It's not killing things, it's correcting them. It thinks we're a mistake. One child, no older than 8, said something that changed everything. It doesn't understand us because we don't belong to just one reality. Humanity realized the truth. They weren't just fighting the Null. They were something the Null had never encountered before. The Aegis directive updated again. Not defense, not attack,
transformation. If the Null erased anything that belonged to a single fixed reality, then humanity would become something that didn't. Across every human world, every ship, every system, the Ascension Protocol activated. Human consciousness began to expand beyond physical form. Ships became more than machines. Bodies became optional. Humanity was no longer bound to space or time or even a single version of existence. They became distributed. War beyond reality. The next battle wasn't fought in space. It wasn't visible. It wasn't even measurable. Humanity entered the Null, not physically, but conceptually. They didn't resist it. They filled it. Everywhere the Null tried to erase, there was humanity. Not one version, not one timeline, but countless overlapping possibilities. The Null tried to correct them, but there was no single version to remove, no fixed state to erase. For the first time, the Null slowed, then hesitated. The first question. The darkness stopped expanding. Across the galaxy, the vanishing ceased. Stars held steady, reality stabilized, and then something impossible happened. The Null actually communicated. Not a command, not a threat, a question. What are you? Humanity answered, not with words, but with everything they had become. Every version, every possibility, every contradiction. We are choice. The end that didn't come. The Null did not retreat, but it did not advance. For the first time since the beginning of time, it encountered something it could not define, could not correct, could not erase, and so it stopped. Epilogue. What comes after? The war didn't end with victory. It ended with understanding. The Null remained at the edge of existence, watching, learning. Humanity returned, changed forever. No longer just a species, no longer just physical beings, but something more. The galaxy would never fully understand what humans had become, but they would remember one truth. When existence itself was threatened, humanity didn't just fight to survive. They changed the rules of reality.
The silence that wasn't empty. The galaxy thought the worst had passed. The stars had stopped disappearing. The Null had stopped advancing. Trade routes reopened. Civilizations began to rebuild. Hope slowly returned. But there was a problem. The edge of the Null wasn't empty anymore. It was changing. The Null learns. For the first time in its existence, the Null was not acting. It was observing. Where humanity existed in overlapping realities, the Null began to imitate. At first, it was subtle. Tiny distortions, echoes of ships that didn't exist, appearing for a fraction of a second, signals arriving before they were sent, entire conversations remembered before they happened. The observers spoke again from the deep void. It is adapting. It is learning choice. That had never happened before, and it terrified them. The first mistake. Humanity believed they had reached a balance, a stalemate. They were wrong. At the edge of a distant system, a human monitoring station reported something impossible. A ship exited the Null, not destroyed, not erased, returned. It was one of the fleets that had been lost in the first battle, a ship that, by all records, never existed. But there it was, damaged, silent, waiting. When they boarded it,
They found no crew, no bodies, no signs of struggle, just one message carved in the command deck in perfect human script. It understands now. The second question. The Null spoke again, but this time it didn't ask what humanity was. It asked, "Why do you exist?" The question spread across every layer of human consciousness, across every version of every human mind, and for the first time, there was no immediate answer, because survival wasn't enough anymore, not for something like the Null, not for something that could erase existence itself. Humanity had to define something deeper. The answer that changed everything. The answer didn't come from leaders or scientists or ancient protocols. It came from the children, the same ones who had first seen the truth of the Null, the same ones who had been taken. Across the network, their voices merged into one simple response. We exist because we choose to care. Not power, not survival, not dominance. Care. For each other, for the galaxy, for existence itself. The reaction. The Null did not understand. At first. But it tried. Across the edge of space, something unprecedented began to happen. Systems that had been erased started to return. Faint at first, incomplete, like memories struggling to become real again. Stars flickered back into existence, planets reformed, fragments of lost civilizations reappeared. The galaxy watched in shock. The observers, for the first time in their endless existence, felt something new. Uncertainty. The warning from the first minds. The observers broke their silence completely. They reached out, not just to humanity, but to everything. And message older than time itself echoed across the universe. This is not restoration. This is transformation. The boundary is breaking. Humanity understood immediately. The Null wasn't just learning, it was changing the rules again, and this time it wasn't alone. Something beyond the Null. Beyond the edge of the Null, beyond even where reality had meaning, something moved. Not like the Null, not like humanity, not like anything that had ever been encountered. Even the Null reacted. For the first time since its awakening, it pulled back. The advancing darkness receded slightly, not in fear, but in recognition. The third presence. Three forces now stood at the edge of existence. Humanity, the beings of choice, the Null, the force of correction, and now something else. The observers named it in their ancient language, the origin. Not a creator, not a god, but something that existed before existence had rules. Epilogue. The war evolves. The galaxy thought the war was over. Then they thought it had been won. Then they thought it had reached balance. They were wrong every time, because now this was no longer a war between survival and destruction. This was something far greater, a conflict between what is, what should be, and what could be. And humanity stood in the middle of all three.
When reality splits, no alarms sounded. No explosions lit the sky. And yet, everything changed. Across the galaxy, people began to see differences. Not illusions, not hallucinations, other versions of reality. Two suns where there should be one. A planet both destroyed and untouched. A fleet arriving and never leaving. Humanity understood first. The boundary the observers warned about had shattered. Reality was no longer singular. The three domains. Existence divided into three overlapping states. 1. The human domain, the realm of choice, where multiple possibilities could coexist. Nothing was fixed, everything was flexible. 2. The null domain, the realm of correction, where only one valid version of reality was allowed. Anything that didn't fit was erased. 3. The origin domain, the realm before rules, where logic didn't apply, where cause and effect had new meaning. And now, all three were bleeding into each other. The first clash. It began at the edge of a fractured star system, a place where all three domains overlapped. A human fleet entered. At the same moment, null forces advanced, and something from the origin appeared. The battle that followed couldn't be recorded because it didn't happen in a single way. In one version, the human fleet won instantly. In another, they were erased before arriving. In another, the battle never happened at all. And yet, all versions were true. Humanity evolves again. The Ascension Protocol adapted. Humanity began to synchronize across realities, not just existing in multiple possibilities, but coordinating them. A ship destroyed in one timeline would survive in another. A strategy that failed would be replaced by one that succeeded. They were no longer reacting, they were selecting outcomes. For the first time, humanity gained an advantage over both the null and the origin. The null fights back. The null responded by tightening reality. Across entire sectors, possibilities collapsed into singular outcomes. Choice disappeared. Human ships entering those regions found themselves trapped, forced into one version of existence. One mistake, one outcome, no second chances. Losses began to rise again. The origin interferes. Then the origin acted. Not strategically, not predictably. Random systems transformed into impossible landscapes. Time flowing backward. Gravity reversing without cause. Stars turning into something that wasn't matter or energy. Entire civilizations became something else entirely. Not destroyed, but redefined. Even the null struggled to correct it, because there was nothing to fix. There were no rules to restore. The children lead. Once again, the key came from the children. Now changed, connected to all three domains, they could perceive something no one else could. The origin wasn't attacking. The null wasn't destroying. They were both doing what they always had. The problem wasn't them. It was the collision. The realization. Humanity had been trying to win, to defeat, to stop, but this wasn't a war that could be won that way, because the null would always correct, the origin would always create chaos, humanity would always choose. Three forces, all necessary, all incompatible, unless... The impossible goal. A new directive emerged, not from command, not from code, from humanity itself. Unify the domains. Not destroy the null, not resist the origin, but bring all three into balance. A reality where choice exists, stability remains, and possibility is infinite. It had never existed before, because nothing had ever tried to create it. The first attempt. Humanity acted. Across the fractured galaxy, they began merging realities,
carefully, stabilizing regions without removing choice, allowing variation without triggering correction, containing chaos without erasing it. For a moment, it worked. A system formed where all three domains coexisted peacefully. Then the null noticed. Then the origin reacted, and everything began to collapse again. Epilogue: The Edge of Becoming. The experiment failed, but not completely, because for a fraction of a moment something new existed. Not human, not null, not origin, something more. And all three forces felt it. Now the war had changed again. It wasn't about survival. It wasn't about dominance. It was about creation. The creation of something that had never existed before. And this time, even the null was watching, with something that almost felt like curiosity.
The last beginning. There was no battlefield anymore, no clear enemy, no front lines. The galaxy had become something else entirely, a place where realities overlapped, where time bent, where existence itself hesitated. And at the center of it all, humanity. Not as a species, not as individuals, but as a conscious force spread across realities. And for the first time since this began, they made a decision together, not to fight, but to create. The final directive. No command was issued, no leader spoke, yet every human across every version of existence understood the same thing. We will build what comes next. Not a weapon, not a defense, a new state of reality. Something where the null wouldn't need to erase, the origin wouldn't destabilize, and humanity wouldn't have to choose between infinite contradictions. A reality where all three could exist without conflict. The convergence. The process began at the center of the fractured galaxy. Humanity gathered, not physically, but across layers of existence. Every version, every timeline, every possibility. Billions became trillions. Trillions became countless. They didn't merge into one. They aligned. A single intention, a single purpose, and then they reached out, not to attack, but to connect. The null's decision. For the first time, the null hesitated. It analyzed the new structure forming, something that didn't violate reality, but didn't fully obey it either. It could erase it, correct it, return everything to a single stable state. But it didn't, because for the first time it detected something new, consistency within choice, a contradiction that somehow worked. So instead of erasing, the null did something it had never done before. It allowed it. The origin responded. Next, the origin reacted. Where it touched the forming reality, chaos surged, impossible transformations, unstable creation. But this time, humanity didn't resist it, they guided it. Not controlling, not restricting, but shaping possibility into meaning. And slowly, the chaos became creation. Not random, not destructive, purposeful. The first true reality. The three forces met, not in conflict, in balance. The new reality formed, not fixed, not unstable, alive. A place where multiple possibilities could exist, but not contradict into collapse. Where change could happen, but not erase what mattered. The galaxy stabilized, not as it was, but as something greater. What humanity became. Humanity did not disappear.
But they changed. They were no longer just beings within reality. They became part of its structure, the bridge between choice, themselves, stability, the null, and creation, the origin. Not rulers, not gods, caretakers. The children's legacy. At the heart of the new reality, the children remained. No longer afraid, no longer lost, they became the first generation to truly belong to this new existence, the first who could live without fear of erasure, without chaos consuming them, without limits on what they could become. They didn't lead, they didn't command, they simply lived. And that was enough. Final epilogue, the meaning of choice. Long after the war, long after the galaxy had stabilized, one final message remained, echoing across existence. We were given power beyond understanding. We faced the end of everything, and in the end, we chose not to destroy, not to dominate, but to create. The Null continued to watch, but now it no longer saw errors. The origin continued to move, but now it no longer brought chaos alone. And humanity? Humanity became the answer to a question that existed since the beginning. What happens when something can choose and chooses to care? Everything changes.